Nari stood at the center of the Galactic Council chamber and spoke clearly into the silence. She was asking for a simple trade agreement, nothing more. She had practiced her words for weeks, made them polite and careful, and delivered them with a calm smile. The 42 species that made up the council barely looked at her. Some whispered to each other. A few laughed quietly. The High Speaker, a tall gray creature called Vorath, thanked her for her time, the way someone thanks a child for drawing a picture. It meant nothing. Nari bowed and stepped back from the podium. She had been dismissed again. She walked through the long, curved hallway of the station and looked out through the wide windows at the stars. Earth was out there somewhere, small and blue, and very far away. Humanity had only been traveling between stars for about 20 years. They had one colony on a nearby system and a small fleet of ships that looked like toys compared to the massive cruisers the council species flew. Nari knew this. She had always known it. But she also believed that patience would open doors. She believed that if humanity kept showing up, kept being polite, kept proving they were worth talking to, the council would eventually listen. She was wrong about the timeline. She did not know that while she was standing in that chamber asking for trade rights, the council had already decided to burn her world. 10,000 light-years away, a fleet was moving. 3,000 warships, sleek and enormous, carrying enough firepower to crack a continent. They belonged to the council's military arm, commanded by a decorated officer called Delmiri. He had received his orders quietly. No public vote, no announcement. Just a classified document, stamped with the seal of the Containment Doctrine, a policy most species in the galaxy did not even know existed. The doctrine was simple. If a young species grew too fast, if their technology advanced at a rate that might one day threaten the balance of power, the council had the right to stop them. The word they used was correct. It sounded clean. It meant war. Delmiri's fleet dropped out of faster-than-light travel above Earth on a Tuesday morning. There was no warning, no demand for surrender, no communication at all. The first thing that happened was light. Bright, terrible, blinding light, as orbital strikes hit military bases, shipyards, satellite networks, and communication towers across the planet. In Seoul, Kwon Tae-ho was eating breakfast in a barracks cafeteria when the ceiling cracked open and fire poured through. He threw himself under a steel table as the building collapsed around him. When he crawled out, covered in dust and blood, half the city was burning. The sky was wrong. It was orange and full of falling things. Pieces of ships, chunks of metal, trails of smoke that stretched from the ground to the heavens like the pillars of some ruined temple. Tae-ho grabbed a rifle from a dead soldier's hands and started shouting. He did not know who was alive and who was dead. He did not know what was happening above the clouds. All he knew was that people were screaming and running, and he was a soldier, and soldiers do not run. He gathered everyone he could find, 43 people in the first hour, and led them toward a subway entrance that was still standing. Below the streets, in the dark, he began to organize. He was not a general yet. He was just a man who refused to stop. In orbit, things were worse. Baek Ji-won was aboard an unfinished space station called Hammer Point. It was supposed to be a construction platform for new ships. She watched, through a viewport, as Earth's small defense fleet, only 92 ships, tried to form a line against 3,000. It lasted 11 minutes. The human ships broke apart like paper. Ji-won felt the station shake as a stray shot clipped one of the support arms. Alarm screamed. She made a decision in 3 seconds. She ordered her skeleton crew of 16 engineers to grab every piece of data they could carry, every scan of the alien ships, every energy signature, every weapon frequency their sensors had recorded. They loaded it all onto a single data core, sealed themselves inside a transport shuttle, and launched away from the station just before it tore itself apart. On the dark side of the moon, in a base that officially did not exist, Admiral Han Do-hyun watched the battle on a wall of screens. His face did not move. His hands did not shake. He watched his ships die. He watched the orbital strikes paint fire across the surface of Earth. Each one was a city. Each one was millions of people. A young officer beside him was crying. Do-hyun put a hand on the officer's shoulder, but did not look away from the screens. When it was clear that the fleet was gone, and Earth's surface defenses were shattered, he gave one quiet order. All surviving ships were to scatter, go silent, and hide. No counterattack. Not today. Today was for surviving. Back on the council station, Nari was standing in a small observation room when the news came through. Someone had put the live feed on a public screen. She saw her planet burning from the outside. It looked almost beautiful in a terrible way. Bright spots of light blooming across the dark side of the globe like flowers opening. She stood perfectly still. Her hands were at her sides. Her face showed nothing. A council attendant passed behind her and glanced at the screen. "Regrettable," the attendant said, and kept walking. In the great chamber, Vorath addressed the council briefly. He called the action unfortunate but necessary. He said humanity had been growing too fast, and that the correction would ensure long-term stability for all species. A few council members nodded. Most did not react at all. Earth was a small matter. It was already over, they thought. Nari left the observation room. She walked slowly back to her quarters. She sat on the edge of her bed in the dark. She did not cry. She did not scream. She closed her eyes and saw every face that had been in that chamber. She memorized each one, every species, every delegate, every pair of eyes that had looked away while her world burned. They thought they had struck down a primitive world. They had no idea they had just given humanity a reason to become everything the council feared. The fires burned for 3 months. After that came the dust, a gray blanket that covered the sky and turned the sun into a dull coin. Crops failed. Rivers were poisoned with debris. Whole coastlines were reshaped by the impact of falling wreckage. The count of the dead climbed past 80 million before anyone stopped counting. There were no governments left in the way people had known them. There were only survivors, and they were angry. But anger alone builds nothing. What saved humanity was not rage. It was stubbornness. A deep, quiet, bone-level refusal to stay down. Within 6 months of the bombardment, people began digging. Not graves, tunnels, factories, laboratories. Deep underground, beneath the ruined cities and the poisoned fields, humanity started building again. Not what they had before. Something new. Something harder. Admiral Han Do-hyun became the center of it all, not because he wanted power, but because everyone trusted him to use it correctly. From the hidden lunar base, he coordinated what was left of the military, the scattered civilian leadership, and the dozens of secret installations that had survived the strikes. He was calm every day. He slept 4 hours a night and spent the rest reading reports, studying alien battle footage, and planning. Always planning. He never once spoke about revenge. He spoke about readiness. He said that when the time came, they would not waste it. His people believed him. Baek Ji-won took the stolen data core to a facility buried inside an asteroid in the belt between Mars and Jupiter. She called her project Forge, and she filled it with every engineer, physicist, and programmer who had survived and could be found. The data core was a treasure. It held the energy signatures of Council weapons, the frequencies of their shields, the patterns of their faster-than-light drives. Ji-won's teams did not just study these things. They tore them apart. And then they made them better. Within 2 years, they had built a working prototype of a new shield generator that was 30% more efficient than anything the Council used. Within 4 years, they had designed a completely new class of warship, It was smaller than Council cruisers, but faster, harder to detect, and armed with weapons that could punch through alien shields like they were made of wet paper. Jiwon named the class Dokebi, after the trickster spirits from old Korean stories. She thought it was fitting. These ships were built to appear from nowhere, cause chaos, and vanish before anyone understood what had happened. Kwon Tae-ho stayed on Earth. He had no interest in space stations or secret labs. His war was in the dirt. He took the scattered survivors he had gathered in those first terrible hours and turned them into soldiers. Not the kind who stand in neat lines and follow orders without thinking. He trained them to fight in buildings, in tunnels, in water, in the dark, in zero gravity. He taught them to board enemy ships and take them from the inside. He trained them to fight aliens who were bigger, stronger, and had better weapons, and to win anyway through speed, teamwork, and pure viciousness. His soldiers called themselves Ashwalkers, because they had been born in the ashes of the bombardment. Tae-ho did not smile often, but when his soldiers chose that name, he nodded once, and that was enough. Shin Eun-ji worked in the shadows. She had been running a small intelligence unit before the attack. Afterward, she turned it into a web that stretched across dozens of star systems. She sent agents to alien trade stations, to neutral ports, to the dark corners of the galaxy where information was bought and sold like cargo. She recruited aliens too, traitors who had been cheated by the Council, exiles from species that had been bullied, criminals who hated authority. She paid them in human technology, which was becoming increasingly valuable, and in promises. She told them that the Council's days were numbered. Some believed her, some did not. But they all took the money and the tech, and gave her what she needed. Fleet movements, patrol schedules, political gossip, the names of Council officers, and what they were afraid of. Eun-ji fed everything back to Do-hyun, and the picture of the enemy grew sharper every month. Yoon-nari remained in Council space. She changed her name, her appearance, her documents. She became a ghost, a human who did not officially exist, drifting through alien stations and diplomatic gatherings under a dozen different identities. She was looking for cracks in the Council's unity, and she found them. Not every species in the Council was happy. Some had been bullied into joining. Some resented the military's power. Some simply did not trust Vorath and his inner circle. Nari found these species and talked to them quietly, in private rooms, over cups of strange alien drinks. She did not ask them to rebel. She just asked them to remember that when the time came, they had a choice. The Council noticed nothing. Delmiri, the officer who had commanded the assault, received a medal and a promotion. Earth was listed in official records as pacified. The word meant dead. It meant finished. Most Council species forgot about humanity entirely. They had other concerns, trade disputes, border arguments, the endless politics of a galaxy full of competing interests. Earth was a footnote. One Council member paid attention. Fenric, a quiet observer from a neutral species, noticed small things. Trade ships going missing near human space. Unusual communication signals that did not match any known pattern. He filed reports. He raised the issue in minor committee meetings. He was told he was seeing patterns that did not exist. He was told to focus on real problems. Fenric stopped raising the issue publicly, but he did not stop watching. 7 years passed. The galaxy was quiet. The Council was comfortable. And deep beneath the scarred surface of Earth, inside hidden asteroid stations, aboard silent ships drifting in the dark spaces between stars, humanity was ready. Every ship was armed. Every soldier was trained. Every secret had been gathered. Every plan had been made. 7 years of silence. The Council mistook it for surrender. Humanity called it preparation. It began with silence. Not the silence of peace, but the silence of a blade being drawn. Shin Unji had spent 3 years mapping every early warning station the Council operated along the border of human space. There were 41 of them, each one a floating eye that watched for ships and sent alerts back to the Council's military command. On the night Unji chose, her operatives hit all 41 within the same hour. No explosions, no battles, just a quiet signal sent to each station that corrupted their communication systems from the inside. The stations went dark. For 12 hours, the Council was blind along an entire front of the galaxy, and they did not even know it. Han Do-hyun had been waiting for those 12 hours his entire life. He gave the order from the bridge of a ship that had no name, only a number. Operation Black Tide. 30 Wolfpack fleets, each made up of 6 to 10 Dokubi-class cruisers, launched from hidden positions across 7 star systems. They moved fast and they moved quietly. Their targets were not warships. They were fuel depots, supply stations, communication relays, and transport convoys. The things an empire needs to function. The boring things. The important things. The first strike hit a fuel depot orbiting a gas giant in the Tasani system. 8 human ships dropped out of faster-than-light travel, fired everything they had in a concentrated burst that lasted 90 seconds, and jumped away before the depot's distress signal could reach anyone. The depot broke apart in a bloom of blue fire that was visible from 3 planets away. The second strike hit a communications relay hub. The third hit a convoy of transport ships carrying replacement parts for Council warships. By the time the 4th and 5th strikes landed, the Council's regional command was receiving fragmented reports of attacks happening everywhere at once. They could not tell how many ships were involved. They could not tell where the attacks were coming from. They could not tell who was attacking. When they finally figured out it was humans, they did not believe it. A junior officer brought the sensor data to his commander and said the energy signatures matched human vessels. The commander looked at the data, looked at the officer, and said that was impossible. Earth was dead. The officer showed him the data again. The commander stopped talking. The galaxy had not seen anything like this in a very long time. The Council's military was enormous and powerful, but it was built for a certain kind of war. Big fleets meeting big fleets in open space. Decisive battles between matched forces. Humanity was not fighting that war. Humanity was fighting a different war. One where you never stood still, never fought fair, and never let the enemy see you long enough to shoot back. Do-hyun had studied every military failure in human history and every military failure in Council history, and he had built his strategy from the lessons of both. Strike fast. Hit what hurts. Disappear. Repeat. Baek Ji-won watched the reports come in from her station in the asteroid belt and allowed herself a small moment of pride. Her Dokubi cruisers were performing beyond expectations. The ships were fast enough to outrun anything the Council had, tough enough to survive a few hits if something went wrong, and armed with weapons that the Council shields were not designed to stop. But her real masterpiece was not the guns or the engines. It was a device mounted in the belly of each ship that could project a field disrupting faster-than-light travel within a certain radius. Any Council ship caught inside that field could not jump away. It was trapped in normal space, slow and vulnerable. In the first engagement where this device was used, a single Dokubi cruiser dropped its field around a Council patrol squadron of 12 ships. The alien captains tried to jump. Nothing happened. They tried again. Still nothing. By the time they understood what was happening, human torpedoes were already in the water. Kwon Tae-ho got his chance 2 weeks into the campaign. Intelligence had identified a Council carrier, a massive ship that served as a mobile base for smaller fighters, passing through a system with minimal escort. Tae-ho loaded his Ashwalkers into boarding shuttles and launched them from a ship hiding behind a moon. The shuttles were small and cold, running on minimal power to avoid detection. They latched onto the carrier's hull like insects on the skin of a giant. Tejo's soldiers cut through the hull with plasma torches and poured inside. The aliens inside had never fought humans at close range. They were taller and stronger, but they were slow. They fought as individuals. Tejo's Ashwalkers fought as teams, covering each other, moving through corridors in coordinated patterns, clearing rooms with a speed and violence that the aliens could not match. The battle for the carrier lasted 4 hours. When it was over, Tejo stood on the bridge of a captured Council warship, surrounded by his soldiers, and opened the ship's navigation database. Inside it was every patrol route, every fleet position, and every supply line the Council operated, in 3 sectors. He sent it all to Dohyun. Delmiri, the officer who had burned Earth 7 years ago, was furious. He assembled a punitive fleet of 500 warships and drove them straight toward the area where the attacks had been concentrated. He would crush this insect rebellion in a single overwhelming strike. He announced his approach openly, wanting the humans to know he was coming. He wanted them to be afraid. He pulled his fleets back into a dense nebula, a cloud of gas and dust where sensors were nearly useless and visibility dropped to almost nothing. Delmiri followed him in. It was a mistake. Inside the nebula, the Council's advantages disappeared. Their big ships could not see. Their superior numbers could not coordinate. Dohyun's small, fast ships moved through the gas like wolves through fog, appearing suddenly, firing, and vanishing again. For 3 days, Delmiri's fleet was torn apart, piece by piece. He lost 200 ships before he ordered a retreat. It was the first military defeat the Council had suffered in 400 years. The galaxy watched. Neutral species whispered to each other. Oppressed species dared to hope. And on a quiet station, far from the fighting, Yun-Nari received a message from one of her diplomatic contacts. It said only 3 words: "We are listening." The Council had spent centuries teaching the galaxy that resistance was futile. Humanity was teaching them otherwise. The defeat in the nebula changed everything. For 400 years, the Council had been the strongest power in the galaxy. Every species knew this. It was the foundation that held everything together. Not trust, not fairness, not shared ideals. Just the simple knowledge that the Council could destroy anyone who disagreed. Now that foundation had a crack in it, and cracks spread. Han Dohyun did not give the galaxy time to forget. Within weeks of Delmiri's retreat, he launched Operation Monsoon. The targets were shipyards, massive orbital factories where the Council built its warships. Without them, the Council could not replace what it lost. Every ship destroyed was a ship gone forever. Dohyun identified the 4 largest shipyards in Council space and sent his best teams to take them. Quan Tejo led the assault on the first shipyard personally. His Ashwalkers had grown since the early days. What had started as a few hundred survivors in a subway tunnel under Seoul was now a force of 12,000, the most feared soldiers in the galaxy. They hit the shipyard in 3 waves. The first wave disabled the station's defenses. The second wave boarded and secured the main sections. The third wave captured the construction bays, where half-finished warships sat in their frames, like sleeping giants. Tejo did not destroy the shipyard. He took it. His engineers began studying the Council's construction methods before the fires were even out. The other 3 shipyards fell within the same month. 2 were captured. 1 was destroyed when its commander chose to blow it up rather than let it be taken. The 4th surrendered without a fight when its crew saw what had happened to the others. The Council's war machine was bleeding, and Baek Ji-won made sure it could not heal. She had been working on something new in their asteroid laboratory, something that went beyond copying alien technology. For 7 years, her teams had studied every piece of Council engineering they could find. They had learned its principles, understood its limits, and then asked a question that no council scientist had asked in centuries. What if we did it differently? The result was a human-designed faster-than-light drive that was fundamentally different from the council's. It was smaller, faster, and used less energy. When the first ship equipped with the new drive completed its test flight, it crossed a distance in 3 hours that would have taken a council ship 5. Jiwan stared at the data for a long time. Then she started building more. This was the moment the war truly turned. The council had always been ahead in technology. That gap was their safety net. Their guarantee that even if a younger species got lucky in a battle, they could never truly challenge the established order. Now that gap was gone. In some areas, humanity had already pulled ahead. The council was not just losing a war, it was losing the future. Nari had been waiting for this moment. For years she had been a ghost in council space, building relationships, collecting promises, and planting seeds of doubt. Now it was time to harvest. She dropped her false identities and revealed herself to her contacts as a representative of Earth. She did not beg for help. She did not make threats. She simply presented the situation as it was. The council was losing. Its military was shrinking. Its technology was falling behind. And every species in the galaxy had a choice to make about which side of history they wanted to stand on. The Tessani, a trading people whose economy the council had been quietly strangling for decades. The Brevirai, a proud warrior species that had been forced to disarm after a failed rebellion a century ago. And the Olani, a quiet, scholarly species that had watched the council suppress scientific discoveries that threatened its control. They pledged their support secretly at first, providing safe harbor for human ships, sharing resources, and passing along intelligence. But as the weeks went on and the council continued to weaken, their support became more open. Other species began to follow. Then Shin Unji delivered the killing blow, not with a weapon, but with the truth. She had spent months infiltrating the council's own intelligence headquarters through a network of bribed officials and compromised computer systems. What she found inside was worse than anyone had imagined. Files going back centuries. Records of every species the council had secretly suppressed under the containment doctrine. Young civilizations that had been bombed back to their Stone Age. Entire species that had been quietly sterilized through engineered plagues. Scientific breakthroughs that had been stolen and buried. The scale of it was staggering. Earth was not a special case. Earth was just the latest in a long, long list. Unji copied everything. Then she sent it everywhere. Every species in the galaxy received the files simultaneously. News networks, diplomatic channels, personal communications, all of it flooded with the council's own records, stamped with the council's own seals, written in the council's own words. The effect was immediate and devastating. Species that had been loyal to the council for generations read the files and discovered that their own histories had been manipulated. Trust did not just erode, it collapsed. 7 species withdrew their fleets within the first week. 4 more declared neutrality. Arguments broke out in the Great Chamber that turned into shouting matches. Delmiri, desperate and furious, demanded that Vorath declare martial law and force the remaining members to fight. Vorath hesitated. He was old and tired, and he could see the numbers. The war was lost. But Delmiri would not accept it. He proposed activating a planet-killer weapon, a device so terrible that the Council itself had banned it 200 years ago. He wanted to point it at Earth and finish what he had started. Vorath refused. For all his flaws, for all the things he had allowed to happen under his leadership, this was a line he would not cross. Delmiri called him a coward. Delmiri tried to take command of the remaining fleet by force. It did not work. His own officers, many of whom had read Yunji's leaked files and seen what the Council truly was, refused to follow him. They arrested him, on the bridge of his own flagship. He did not fight. He simply stood there, surrounded by officers who would no longer meet his eyes, and said nothing. Human and allied fleets pushed forward. System after system was liberated. Each freed world joined the growing coalition. The momentum was a river now, wide and fast, and impossible to stop. The Council had built their empire on the belief that no one would ever push back. They had never planned for what to do when someone did. The fleet arrived at the Council's capital station on a quiet morning by Galactic Standard Time. 200 human warships and 300 allied vessels from a dozen species formed a silent ring around the massive structure. They did not fire. They did not need to. The Council's remaining defense fleet, barely 80 ships, looked at the numbers and powered down their weapons. A message came from inside the station. Vorath, the High Speaker, was requesting a ceasefire. Han Do-hyun read the message on the bridge of his flagship. He was standing the way he always stood, straight and still, with his hands behind his back and his face showing nothing. His officers watched him, waiting. He had led them through 7 years of silence and 2 years of war. He had taken a broken species and turned it into a force that had brought the oldest power in the galaxy to its knees. If any human alive had earned the right to demand vengeance, it was him. Then he opened them and dictated his response. He accepted the ceasefire. He had one condition. The Council would face a formal tribunal. Not destruction, not conquest, justice. His officers looked at each other. Some of them had lost families in the bombardment. Some of them wanted blood. But they followed their admiral, as they always had, because they trusted him to see further than they could. The air was thick with tension and the low hum of 100 different translation devices. Yunari walked to the central podium alone. She wore a simple dark suit. No medals, no decorations, no symbols of rank or nation. She carried a small data tablet in one hand. She looked out at the chamber, at the hundreds of alien faces staring down at her, and she remembered the last time she had stood in this room. She had been a young diplomat then, polite and hopeful, asking for a trade agreement that nobody cared about. They had laughed at her. They had dismissed her. Then they had burned her world. She was not here to ask for anything today. She began to speak. Her voice was calm and even. She did not shout. She did not cry. She spoke the way a doctor speaks when delivering a diagnosis, with precision and without emotion, because the facts were terrible enough on their own. She told them what had happened on the day the sky burned. She told them about the 80 million dead. She told them about the cities that had been turned to glass. She told them about the children who had burned alive in their schools because the schools were close to military targets, and the Council's targeting systems did not distinguish between soldiers and 7-year-olds. She showed them pictures, not of the burning, of before. She projected faces onto the chamber's display system. Children smiling, families eating dinner, old men sitting in parks, a woman holding a baby on a street that no longer existed. She showed them one face at a time, slowly, and she said each name. The chamber was completely silent. Some of the alien delegates looked away. Nari did not let them. She kept the faces on the screen. She kept saying the names. Then she put down the pictures and picked up the data. She showed them the containment doctrine. Not the summary, not the official version, but the original classified document with every signature and every stamp. She showed them the list of species that had been suppressed. 47 civilizations, over 800 years. Some had been bombed. Some had been poisoned. Some had simply been isolated and starved of resources until they collapsed. 12 of those species no longer existed at all. They were gone, erased, not even a memory left, except in the Council's own secret files. She read some of the internal communications. Messages between council officials, discussing which species to target next. Casual messages. Board messages. One official had written about the planned assault on Earth, the way someone might write about a minor scheduling problem. The human correction is set for next quarter. Should not require significant resources. Nari read that line out loud and let it hang in the air. He was sitting in his chair at the top of the chamber, where the high speaker had always sat. He looked old. He looked tired. He did not look away. Nari spoke directly to him. "You assaulted Earth," she said. "You burned our cities. You killed our people. You killed our children. You thought we were primitive. You thought we would break. You were wrong about all of it." She paused. The silence in the chamber was so complete that she could hear the hum of the station's life support systems. "And now," she said, "you will answer for what you have done. Not to us, to every species you silenced before they could speak." Vorath lowered his head. He did not argue. He did not defend himself. He simply nodded, once, and the weight of that nod carried 800 years of crimes with it. Delmiri was brought into the chamber in restraints. He stood where he was placed and stared straight ahead. For the first time in his life, he had nothing to say. The officer who had burned a world and received a medal for it stood in silence while the galaxy watched. Fenric, the quiet observer who had tried to warn the council years ago and been ignored, stood from his seat. He walked to the floor of the chamber and formally seconded humanity's call for a tribunal. His voice was soft, but it carried. Other delegates stood after him, one by one, then in groups. Within an hour, the motion was unanimous. The old Galactic Council dissolved itself. In the weeks that followed, a new Galactic Assembly was formed. It was not perfect, no government is, but it was built on a different foundation. Not on fear, but on the principle that no species had the right to decide whether another species deserved to exist. Humanity was a founding member. Han Do-hyun retired. He went back to Earth, to a small house near the coast where the rebuilding was still happening. And he planted a garden. Baek Ji-won led the new Assembly's technology sharing program, making sure that scientific knowledge would never again be hoarded as a weapon. Kwon Tae-ho oversaw the demilitarization process, turning the Ashwalkers from soldiers into peacekeepers. Shin Eun-ji disappeared. Some said she had gone back to her intelligence work, watching the new assembly the same way she had watched the old council, making sure the same mistakes were never made again. No one knew for certain. Yoon Nari was offered the position of first speaker of the new Galactic Assembly. She accepted. On her first day, she stood at a window on the station and looked out at the stars. A young alien diplomat approached her nervously. He was new to his position and clearly intimidated. He asked her a question that he had clearly been thinking about for a long time. "Are humans always this persistent?" Nari smiled. It was a real smile, warm and tired, and full of something that might have been hope. "We knocked on your door politely for 20 years, she said. "You answered with fire. So we built a bigger door and walked through it." She looked back at the stars. "Yes, we are always this persistent."